Greetings, friends. We are back for the December 8th video podcast. Welcome you on behalf of Steve Autrey at Denver United Methodist Church. I'm Paul Thompson, Huntersville United Methodist Church. And today we want to start a conversation that really began last week that involves John the Baptist.
Just can't get away from that guy.
Can't get away from John the Baptist.
And before we get into this, I hope that you are paying attention to your inbox, because most days of Advent we are sending out devotionals that our teams worked on together to give you a little something every day, whether it's this video format or whether it's in a written format that shows up so that you can hopefully journey together towards Christmas.
And not only journeying to Christmas, but journeying toward a deeper faith, a faith that is able to withstand the test of the times that we're in, a faith that's building towards something besides just the celebration of a cultural Christmas, but something that's going to indeed enliven our faith for the rest of our lives. And today we really get into what I think is some fascinating conversation around this guy, John the Baptist. And Steve, John the Baptist is a central figure. We spend 2 Sundays on John in the lectionary cycle. We spend 2 Sundays really introducing the idea of John the Baptist and his role in the life of preparing the way for the coming of the Messiah. Focus in on John the Baptist. First, his role, who he is in the life of preparation for Jesus. But then as we really think about this week, the message that John brings, there really is this fascinating dichotomy between what John preaches and eventually what we're going to hear from Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, John, of course, we talked quite a bit about him last year, but John comes and holds up a rather painful mirror to the people who come to see him. And he says, take a good hard look at yourself. And he's not an attractional preacher, let me put it that way. One of the things we always have a conversation before we come in here to shoot these videos, and we reminisced a little bit about the seeker-sensitive movement. And maybe you remember that time in the life of the church. There's still plenty of churches that are seeker-sensitive, but the whole idea behind that would be that, hey, don't be offensive. Build your facility, I'm not even going to say church, in such a way that there are no symbols that could possibly offend anyone. No cross, no stained glass, nothing that would turn people off. Make it as easy as you can for them. And so there was a period of time where the church growth movement was all about seeker sensitivity, getting people in the door and not troubling them to any degree so that they would come back. And while I think there's some things that need to be paid attention to that. What's interesting to me, however, is John is completely the opposite, and yet he's drawing crowds not by telling them soft, easy prosperity messages. He is giving them the business.
So if you'll turn to the scriptures with us from Luke chapter 3, verses 7 through 18, that's where our focus is going to be this week. And it begins with some language around the whole community, whole towns, people were coming out to be baptized by John. And to be able to contrast especially what John preaches his baptism is about versus what it means to be baptized in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. But John really chides the people and said, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Who told you to come, you brood of vipers?
Yeah,
well, have you ever stood up and called your people a brood of vipers on Sunday?
Every Sunday, you horrible bunch of snakes. No, I haven't.
That wouldn't go over too well, even now, would it?
Probably not. But John he's pointing out their reality, and they don't want to hear that. I think, if John were here today, there's no telling what he would call us. I had someone reach out to me and just say, I think it's interesting that we're so worried about the container ships at Christmas and all the stuff being on the container ships. And his observation was it's an interesting reminder of what Christmas is really about. I think John would look at us and say something like, here you are worried about a bunch of junk that's on a container ship and whether it's going to be on your shelves or not. You've completely missed the picture. And then he would say, "You brood of vipers."
Yeah. Because obviously our focus is not on what it should be on. Our focus should be on the coming of Christ and the transformation that comes with that, but we're really focused on kind of a cultural expression of what that looks like, an economic expression.
Right. Well, and in that regard, I mean, John is a pretty harsh set of corrective lenses, right? I mean, he's trying to put the glasses on first the leaders of Israel and their entitlement. And he starts out by saying, you think just because you come from the right family, you know, how dare you say you're a son of Abraham? Just because you're Jewish doesn't mean anything.
So John's message is multifaceted, and one of the phrases he uses, and I think this one is really worth kind of fleshing out, is he tells us to bear fruits worthy of repentance. Steve, I think that phrase is just absolutely loaded. What do you think John means when he says bear fruits worthy of repentance?
Well, I think it's if you're going to make a change that is real, don't just say, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Oh yeah, I'll get around to that." No, do something that actually shows that you've made a change. In other words, where's the evidence? You know, show me the money, so to speak. Like if you've really turned, then your life should look like it.
Yeah, Mr. Wesley, John Wesley, phrased it this way in his sermons. He called it fruits meet for repentance. That's an old English word, fruits meet for repentance, which simply means it is an accurate expression of what repentance means. What fruits need to be born in our lives that show that we have truly repented. Wesley talked about going from doing evil to learn to do well. And I think that there is that sense in which John awakens in us this awareness of just how evil our thoughts and actions are typically. We are so inwardly focused. We are so focused on all the wrong things that when we're called to repentance, what does that mean then to move and do not just bad, but do well?
Well, it starts by moving beyond entitlement. That first statement is about entitlement. These folks thought they were entitled to a special place in God's kingdom or God's hierarchy because of simply how they were born. And when we have any level of entitlement, then we don't really appreciate what we have. And when we don't appreciate what we have, we don't really give God the credit for what we do have. And you know, John moves from this kind of, hey, get this right in your head and heart, but make sure it plays out in your life.
And so that really is the message that begins in John the Baptist. It begins with what you and I would normally look at and we would think condemnation and judgment. John is not afraid to hurt feelings. He is not afraid to speak this truth in ways that even the good people of the day, you know, the people who are coming out, eagerly asking and seeking, what is it that God would want from us? Boy, John is strong in his language.
Well, and I think it also speaks to that God does place in our hearts this feeling that something's just not right, that there's something to miss. If everything was good in these people's lives, why would they come out to see John? And if they thought everything was good in their lives. So that feeling of discontent, that, you know, something's just not right with how I'm living my life, is actually a gift from God, because it awakens us up to the reality that we need a change. And we need to address the causes of our discontent. We try to fill that up with all kinds of things. Lord knows we buy enough stuff to try to make ourselves happy. It's fascinating how shopping and purchasing things actually causes a bit of an endorphin rush, right? So there's a short-term kind of boost to your feelings, your ego, your emotions when you purchase something. But we all know that new car smell, it wears off pretty quickly. That new whatever that you thought was so awesome, before long gets in the corner somewhere or stacked up in the closet, and we're still back to the beginning where we still feel this almost agony of the soul that something isn't right. And so part of what John the Baptist does for us is help us name what we already to some degree know is going on in our own hearts, because God's gifted us with that knowledge that things just aren't right.
Yeah, John speaks the truth that will set you free, but first will deeply unsettle you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we are trying to do for ourselves and with you, is how do we become unsettled enough in this season to really ask the difficult questions and to grapple with some hard truths.
And so tomorrow, I think what we're going to take up the topic of looking at some of the brutal facts that John points out. And that's one of those mantras of good leadership is first face the brutal facts. And John faces the brutal facts. So hopefully tomorrow we can look at some brutal facts. That's not very seeker sensitive, I know. But will you come back?
Yeah, we look forward to tomorrow to get beat up some more.
Yeah.
We look forward to seeing you. Thank you for joining us today, always for your attention.
Thank you.